Imagine for a moment that the very thing you fear to admit, your desire, your hunger, that secret pulse within you, holds the key to understanding who you truly are. You see, most people spend their lives running from their desires. They call them shameful, sinful, or inconvenient. They bury them beneath duty, morality, or fear. But what they do not understand is that every desire you suppress does not die. It sinks into the unconscious and waits. It becomes a shadow, your shadow, and it follows you, whispering in your dreams, shaping your choices, even guiding your fate. Your sexual desire is not merely about pleasure. It is a language. It speaks in symbols. It reveals the direction of your longing, the archetype that seeks expression through you. It is not always about the physical act. Often it is the psyche's way of saying, I want to unite with something lost, something greater than myself. When you desire another, you're not just reaching for a body. You are reaching for a forgotten part of your soul. The attraction, the intensity, the fire, it is your unconscious projecting an image of your own potential onto another person. That is why love at its truest feels divine. You are not simply drawn to someone. You are drawn toward wholeness. But what happens when you deny this force? It turns dark. It becomes envy, obsession, addiction, or despair. When Eros is rejected, it seeks revenge through your unconscious. It will make you restless. It will make you sabotage what you love. And it will lead you again and again to the same patterns until you finally listen. To understand your desire is to look into a mirror that never lies. It shows you what you crave, what you fear, what you repress, and what you could become. Desire in its purest form is not an enemy to be conquered. It is energy waiting to be integrated. So when you next feel that spark within you, do not condemn it. Observe it. Ask, what part of my soul is calling me through this longing? Because in that question lies the beginning of self-knowledge. In truth, your sexual desire is not about sex at all. It is about life itself, the creative force that built the stars, the same energy that pushes a seed to bloom, the same impulse that urges your soul toward transformation. To understand it is to understand the divine fire within you. ChatGPT said, when we speak of sexual desire, we are not merely describing a biological impulse, nor are we confined to the realm of instinct. What we are encountering is one of the most profound expressions of the psyche, a mirror that reflects the hidden architecture of the soul. Too often, we mistake this energy as something external, as though it were a force imposed upon us, but in truth it arises from the deepest layers of our being. Sexual desire is not a distraction from the path of self-understanding. It is part of that path. To ignore it is to blind ourselves to one of the most direct revelations of who we truly are. You see, every person carries within them a symbolic image of the ideal, what Jung called the Anima or Animus, the inner feminine in man and the inner masculine in woman. These archetypal images shape what we find beautiful, magnetic, or desirable. When we encounter someone who ignites our desire, what we are really meeting is a reflection of this inner image. It is as though our unconscious has projected a forgotten aspect of ourselves onto another being, compelling us toward them with an intensity that feels both irrational and divine. The experience can be overwhelming, because it is not simply about the other person. It is about the rediscovery of ourselves. If you observe closely, desire always points towards something missing, something not yet fully lived. It is the psyche's way of saying, there is more of you waiting to be realized. That spark of attraction, that inexplicable pull, these are not accidents. They are signals. The person or situation that evokes desire becomes a kind of mirror, reflecting the qualities we have not yet integrated. For some, it might be spontaneity, vulnerability, passion, or freedom. For others, it may represent power, tenderness, or creativity. The face of your desire changes, but the underlying message is always the same. You are being called to expand your being. However, because society often teaches us to fear or repress our sexual nature, we lose sight of its symbolic dimension. We reduce it to mere indulgence or shame. But desire, when understood psychologically, is not corrupting. It is revealing. It shows us the contours of our inner landscape. When you feel a strong desire, do not immediately seek to satisfy or suppress it. Instead, pause and ask, what is this energy trying to tell me about myself? What does it reveal about what I am longing for beyond the physical? That question alone can begin to unravel a deep self-understanding that no moral code or external authority can provide. In this sense, sexual desire becomes a kind of dialogue between the conscious and unconscious mind. The conscious ego may believe it seeks another person, but the unconscious seeks transformation. The tension between those two aims, the outer pursuit and the inner revelation, is what makes desire such a potent teacher. It disrupts the illusions we have built about who we are. It forces us to confront our contradictions, our craving for intimacy against our fear of vulnerability, our longing for freedom against our dread of rejection. In this confrontation, the true psychological work begins. When understood in this way, desire ceases to be a source of guilt or confusion. It becomes an invitation to self-knowledge. It is the psyche's attempt to heal the split between the known and the unknown parts of ourselves. Every attraction carries meaning. Every longing hides a lesson. The tragedy is not that we desire too much. It is that we interpret our desires too narrowly. We chase bodies when we should be listening to symbols. We search for others when we are being asked to find ourselves. Of course, this does not mean that sexual experience should be denied or transcended. On the contrary, it means approaching it with awareness, with reverence for the mystery it contains. When two people meet with that awareness, their connection can transcend mere physicality. It becomes an act of psychological alchemy, where both are transformed by the exchange. The body becomes the vessel through which the soul speaks. Eros, then, is not just about pleasure. It is about awakening. This understanding requires courage, because to truly look into the mirror of your desire is to confront aspects of yourself you may prefer to avoid. Desire exposes your insecurities, your unmet needs, your unacknowledged wounds, but it also reveals your capacity for love, imagination, and transcendence. It shows you the magnitude of your longing, not just for another person, but for meaning, for unity, for the divine. In every yearning lies the possibility of redemption, if only you have the strength to face it without judgment. So when you feel that familiar fire stirring within you, do not rush to extinguish it, and do not be enslaved by it. Instead, observe it as you would a sacred flame. It is the light of your unconscious, illuminating what your conscious mind has forgotten. Let it teach you. Let it guide you back to the parts of your soul that are still waiting to be claimed. Because in the end, your sexual desire does not define your weakness. It reveals your depth. It is not a sign of sin, but a signal of life itself yearning to become whole through you. There is a law in the psyche that cannot be broken without consequence. Whatever we repress does not disappear. It returns. And nowhere is this more evident than in the realm of sexual desire. When society, religion, or our own conscience tells us to silence this instinct, we imagine that suppression equals control. But in truth, repression is never mastery. It is exile. What we banish from consciousness does not die. It descends into the unconscious, where it grows in power, waiting for its moment to re-emerge. This hidden energy, unacknowledged and unintegrated, becomes what I call the shadow. The shadow is not evil. It is simply the part of the self we refuse to see. It contains everything we deny, reject, or fear to acknowledge about who we are. And sexual desire, because it touches the most primal, raw, and instinctive parts of human nature, becomes one of the first things cast into that darkness. We are taught to fear it, to moralize it, to hide it behind walls of politeness or piety. But the psyche does not forget. Every desire you suppress continues to live in the depths of your unconscious, influencing your behavior in ways you cannot control. You may think you have conquered your impulses, but more often, they have simply taken another form, one that is harder to recognize, and therefore more dangerous. Consider how often people become entangled in secret compulsions, obsessions, or unexplained emotional turbulence. They believe they are battling external problems, stress, depression, self-doubt, but underneath it is often the voice of repressed desire demanding to be heard. When sexual energy is denied conscious expression, it mutates. It may manifest as envy, resentment, or even cruelty. It may appear as addiction, whether to people, substances, or power. It can even express itself through creative or religious fervor, if the energy finds no other outlet. What we repress in the body reappears in the spirit, disguised but unspent. To live in denial of desire is to live in inner conflict. The conscious mind insists on order, purity, and control, while the unconscious resists, pushing back with images, fantasies, and emotions that disturb the surface peace. This inner war fragments the self, and fragmentation, in psychological terms, is a form of suffering, the feeling of being divided between who you think you are and who you truly are. True morality, then, is not about suppressing the instinct but understanding it. For if we continue to reject our sexual nature, we give it over to the shadow entirely, and once there, it operates without our awareness or responsibility. This is why people sometimes act out of character, under the influence of passion or temptation. It is not that something foreign has taken hold of them, it is that the part of themselves they have long ignored has seized its chance to speak. The energy of the shadow, when unacknowledged, does not obey the ego's will. It erupts, sudden and often destructive, as if to reclaim its rightful place in the totality of the psyche. The task, therefore, is not to destroy or repress sexual desire, but to integrate it. Integration means bringing the shadow into the light, not to justify every impulse, but to understand its meaning. What does this desire represent? What unmet longing or forgotten truth lies beneath it? When we begin to face our own shadow with honesty, something extraordinary happens. The energy that once caused chaos begins to transform into creative power. The same instinct that once threatened to undo us becomes the source of our vitality, imagination, and authenticity. There is great wisdom in desire, but it speaks in the language of symbols. When you dream of intimacy, of pursuit, of union, you are not only dreaming of another person, you are dreaming of your own wholeness. Sexual energy, when denied, becomes a dark current pulling you toward unconscious behavior. When acknowledged, it becomes a bright current leading you toward consciousness. This is why every act of repression is, in a sense, a refusal of life itself. The psyche seeks to live fully, to express itself in all dimensions. To cut off desire is to cut off one of its most potent expressions. We must remember that repression is not the same as discipline. Discipline is conscious control. It comes from understanding. Repression, however, is born of fear. The disciplined person channels desire toward creation, love, or spiritual awakening. The repressed person hides from it, pretending it does not exist, only to be haunted by it in more distorted forms. When you meet people who are rigidly moralistic or excessively judgmental, you are often witnessing the outward signs of a deep inner repression. Their intolerance of others mirrors their own intolerance of themselves. To integrate the shadow, we must have the courage to look at our own darkness without flinching. That means recognizing the part of you that desires, that craves, that envies, that feels shame, and instead of condemning it, asking why it exists. What is it trying to tell you? Behind every forbidden impulse lies a piece of truth you have not yet claimed. Perhaps it speaks of your need for connection, for freedom, for authenticity. Perhaps it is a call to live more fully. But you cannot answer that call if you refuse to hear it. The paradox of repression is this: the more you deny desire, the more it controls you. The moment you acknowledge it, you regain your power. Integration begins not with indulgence, but with awareness. When you look honestly at your own shadow, it ceases to rule you from the dark. So I tell you this: do not fear the voice of your desire, for it is not the voice of corruption. It is the voice of truth, distorted by silence. Bring it into the light. Let it speak, and listen not with guilt but with curiosity. Because the energy you repress will one day demand expression, and the choice is yours. Will it emerge as chaos, or will it emerge as creation? In the end, to face your shadow is to reclaim your power. And that power, once owned, will no longer consume you, it will complete you. One of the most mysterious truths about human desire is that what we seek in another person is often what we have lost within ourselves. Every act of attraction carries with it a hidden psychological projection, a transfer of unconscious material onto the person who stands before us. This is not manipulation or fantasy. It is the psyche's way of revealing to us what is missing, what has been repressed, or what remains unrealized in our inner life. Desire, then, is never random. It is a mirror, precise, symbolic, and profoundly intimate. When you fall in love or experience an intense attraction, what you are really meeting is an image born from the depths of your own unconscious. The other person becomes a screen upon which your psyche projects its inner archetype of completeness. Jung called these archetypes the Anima and Animus, the feminine image within man and the masculine image within woman. These archetypes are not mere fantasies. They are the psychic blueprints through which we seek wholeness. When we encounter someone who embodies the qualities of our inner image, our entire being responds as though destiny itself has spoken. That feels like recognition rather than discovery, as if we have found a part of ourselves we did not know was missing. This explains why certain people can stir something in us that logic cannot explain. You may meet hundreds of faces, but only one or two seem to awaken that profound sense of familiarity and longing. It is not simply because of who they are, it is because of what they represent. They carry for a time the projection of your unlived potential. They hold the key to a hidden chamber of your soul. That is why passion often feels sacred, even irrational. It is the psyche's attempt to reunite the divided parts of itself. But projection is both revelation and illusion. It reveals the part of ourselves that seeks integration, yet it also blinds us to the reality of the other person. We mistake our own inner image for their true nature. We believe we are seeing them clearly, when in truth we are gazing at our own soul reflected in their form. The danger is that when the projection begins to fade, as it inevitably must, we often feel betrayed or disillusioned. The person we once idealized becomes ordinary and we suffer, believing love has died. But in that moment, if we are wise, we will see that something far greater has occurred. The projection has served its purpose. It has shown us the part of ourselves we were meant to reclaim. The psychological work begins when we withdraw that projection consciously. We must ask, what qualities did I see in this person that so moved me? What part of myself was I seeking through them? Perhaps it was tenderness, courage, creativity, or passion. Whatever it is, that quality belongs not to them, but to you. They merely awakened it. The relationship, whether it lasts a lifetime or a single moment, becomes a sacred mirror reflecting your path to wholeness. Desire, then, is not simply a biological drive or a romantic adventure. It is a call from the unconscious toward integration. It draws you outward so that you might journey inward. It uses the image of another person to awaken the dormant forces within your psyche. The goal is not to possess the other, but to encounter yourself through them. When you understand this, love becomes less about attachment and more about awakening. This is why relationships can be both ecstatic and painful. Every intimate bond is, in essence, a psychological initiation. We are confronted not only with the beauty of our projections, but also with our shadows, our fears, our insecurities, our unmet needs. The very intensity that draws us together can also expose the fractures in our inner life, and yet this is precisely how growth occurs. We learn to differentiate between projection and reality, between fantasy and truth, between the longing for completion and the acceptance of imperfection. When two people recognize that their attraction is also a psychological dialogue, something extraordinary happens. The relationship shifts from dependency to conscious union. Each person begins to see the other not as an idol or possession, but as a companion in the journey of individuation. Love ceases to be a place of escape and becomes a field of transformation. Through mutual awareness, the projection dissolves into genuine connection, and the energy once bound to illusion is released into creativity, empathy, and wisdom. But to reach that level of awareness, one must be willing to suffer the loss of illusion. The death of projection often feels like the death of love, but in truth it is its rebirth. Only when the veil lifts can we see the person before us, not as the embodiment of our fantasy, but as a fellow human soul, carrying their own wounds, their own depths, their own divinity. To love them, then, is no longer an act of possession, but of recognition. I see you not as a reflection of my longing, but as you truly are. That is the highest form of love, and it can only emerge through the understanding of projection. If we never examine our projections, we remain prisoners of them. We move from one relationship to another, always chasing the same image, always seeking completion in someone else, never realizing that the thing we pursue lives within us. The pattern repeats until consciousness intervenes, until we turn inward and ask, what am I really looking for? And perhaps in that moment of honesty, we discover that our longing for another has always been the soul's longing for itself, for integration, for balance, for unity. To project is human. To withdraw projection consciously is the beginning of self-knowledge. So when desire next arises, when someone captures your attention and awakens that deep, inexplicable pull, Pause before surrendering to the illusion. Ask what within you is calling to be recognized, because sometimes the person you are most drawn to is not your missing half, but your mirror. And if you can see that clearly, without fear or denial, you will begin to love not from emptiness, but from wholeness. There exists within every human being a profound creative force, a current that flows from the same source as desire itself. This energy, which the ancients called Eros, is the vital thread connecting body, mind, and spirit. It is the pulse that animates not only our sexuality, but also our art, our imagination, our yearning for connection, and our search for meaning. When we understand sexual desire only in biological or moral terms, we limit its vast significance. For in truth, Eros is not simply an instinct. It is the creative principle of life itself moving through us. Think for a moment of how this energy behaves. When it is suppressed, it becomes restless, chaotic, even destructive. But when it is acknowledged and directed consciously, it gives birth to beauty, insight, and vitality. The same energy that drives a person to pursue physical union is the energy that inspires a poet to write, a painter to create, a scientist to discover, or a seeker to pray. Desire and creation are not separate. They are different expressions of the same inner fire. The question then is not whether we have this energy, but whether we have learned to use it with awareness. When you feel sexual desire, what you are experiencing is the psyche's call toward creation and connection. It is not merely a wish to possess or to be satisfied. It is a symbolic movement toward life, toward unity. The human soul seeks to participate in the generative rhythm of the universe. Every longing, whether it finds expression in love, art, or spiritual devotion, is an echo of that cosmic urge. We long not only for another person, but for participation in the creative act itself, for the experience of being fully alive. But this energy can easily turn against us when it is misunderstood. When Eros is denied its higher purpose, it falls into mere compulsion. The individual becomes trapped in cycles of gratification and emptiness, mistaking intensity for meaning. This is what happens when we treat sexuality as an end rather than a path to self-knowledge, transformation, and creation. To use Eros consciously, one must learn to distinguish between lust that seeks escape and desire that seeks expression. The former depletes, the latter creates. In the unconscious, Eros is not just physical, it is symbolic. It speaks to our need for unity between opposites, the masculine and feminine, the conscious and unconscious, the spiritual and material. When we engage our desire without awareness, we enact this search externally, always looking for another person to complete us. But when we integrate this energy inwardly, the opposites begin to reconcile within. We find that the union we sought outside can also occur within the psyche. This is the essence of creativity, the inner marriage of opposites, giving birth to new forms, new insights, new life. You can see this truth reflected everywhere in culture and mythology. The artist merges imagination with discipline to create art. The scientist joins intuition with logic to uncover truth. The lover unites body and soul in the act of love. All of these are expressions of the same principle, the sacred dance of opposites seeking harmony. And at the center of that dance burns the flame of Eros. It is the energy of becoming, of transformation, of the eternal movement from potential to realization. What makes Eros divine is its capacity to transmute instinct into meaning. To feel desire consciously is to feel the pulse of creation itself. It is to stand at the edge between the human and the transcendent. This is why great works of art, music, and philosophy are often born from longing. They arise from that tension between what we have and what we yearn for. Desire opens a space within the soul, a creative emptiness, and from that space new life emerges. But to channel this energy wisely requires discipline and honesty. It demands that we confront our impulses without shame, yet also without indulgence. The aim is not to repress the energy, nor to be consumed by it, but to transform it, to allow it to rise through us, refining our instincts into insight, our passion into purpose. When sexual energy is sublimated into creative or spiritual expression, it does not lose its potency. It becomes radiant, alive with meaning. This is the secret of all true transformation, that nothing is ever destroyed, only transfigured. The fire that once burned for possession can become the flame of inspiration. The desire that once sought another body can become the longing for truth, for art, for God. Every form of authentic creation is the spiritualized expression of Eros. To live creatively, then, is to live erotically, not in the narrow sense of sensual pleasure, but in the deeper sense of being open, receptive, and passionately engaged with life. When we recognize Eros as the force of creation, we begin to see that our task is not to escape desire, but to learn its language. The same energy that stirs the body is the energy that moves galaxies, grows forests, and shapes destinies. It is the life principle itself, seeking expression through you. To deny it is to deny life. To honor it is to align yourself with the rhythm of the universe. If you learn to work with this energy, you will discover that desire can become devotion. The longing for another can evolve into a longing for meaning. And the act of creation, whether through art, love, or consciousness, becomes a prayer, a celebration of being alive. So the next time you feel that spark within you, that restlessness, that yearning, do not rush to extinguish it nor to waste it on fleeting indulgence. Sit with it. Listen to what it is asking of you. That tension is not your enemy. It is your teacher. It is the sacred invitation to create, to transform, to awaken. Because when you truly understand Eros, you realize it is not only the force that draws you toward others, it is the force that draws you toward the divine. The journey of human consciousness is at its heart the journey toward wholeness. Every experience, every conflict, every longing, especially those born of sexual desire, serves this single underlying purpose: to bring us face to face with the parts of ourselves we have forgotten or denied. When we begin to understand and integrate these forces, we take a decisive step toward what Jung called individuation, the process of becoming whole, of uniting the many fragments of the psyche into a coherent and authentic self. To integrate one's desires is not to tame them into silence, nor to indulge them without restraint, but to understand their meaning. This understanding requires courage, because it means turning toward what we often avoid, the raw, untamed impulses that stir within us. Yet those impulses are not enemies of the soul. They are its messengers. Every desire contains a piece of information about who we are and what we are capable of becoming. When we repress or ignore it, we remain divided. But when we bring it into consciousness, when we name it, explore it, and seek its purpose, it begins to transform from instinct into insight, from chaos into coherence. The process of integration always begins with awareness. One must observe desire without judgment, allowing it to speak in its own language. Ask yourself, what does this longing want from me? What is it showing me about the life I am not yet living? Often you will find that beneath the surface of sexual desire lies something much larger, a hunger for intimacy, authenticity, creativity, or transcendence. The physical impulse is simply the form through which the psyche communicates its deeper need. When that message is heard, the energy of desire becomes constructive rather than destructive. You see, individuation is not about becoming perfect, it is about becoming whole. It is about accepting the coexistence of opposites within you, the spiritual and the carnal, the rational and the instinctual, the sacred and the profane. True maturity comes not from denying your lower nature, but from giving it a rightful place within your being. The energy that once caused conflict becomes a bridge between your conscious self and your unconscious depths. You begin to realize that what you once called sin or weakness was in fact a call toward integration, a hiesta reminder that wholeness cannot exist without the acceptance of all parts. To integrate your desire is to become fully human. It is to acknowledge that you are both light and shadow, divine and animal. When you deny one side in favor of the other, you fall into imbalance, either moral rigidity or moral collapse. But when you hold both in awareness, something greater emerges, a centered self that is no longer ruled by compulsion or guilt, but guided by understanding. This is the alchemy of the soul, where instinct becomes intuition, and passion becomes wisdom. Sexual desire, when understood in this way, becomes one of the most powerful instruments of self-realization. It confronts us with our limits and invites us to transcend them. It forces us to see how easily we project our unmet needs onto others, and how the fulfillment we seek outside is often the wholeness we are missing inside. The more consciously we engage with this energy, the more it becomes a force of growth rather than bondage. Through it, we learn self-awareness, empathy, and humility, qualities that no amount of repression or indulgence could ever cultivate. The path of individuation is not linear. It is cyclical, unfolding through tension and release, union and separation. At times you may feel torn between opposing desires, to be free yet connected, to experience pleasure yet remain pure, to transcend yet remain grounded. These conflicts are not signs of failure. They are the raw material of transformation. Each tension holds the potential for synthesis, for a new understanding that includes rather than excludes. The soul evolves through contradiction, and integration is the art of holding those contradictions without collapse. What makes this process so vital is that it restores meaning to desire. When you begin to see your longings not as moral flaws, but as psychological messages, you can live with greater honesty and depth. You no longer waste energy in shame or denial. Instead, you redirect it toward creation, connection, and purpose. This is what Jung meant by becoming individuated, not the suppression of instinct, but its harmonization with spirit. The goal is not to ascend beyond the human, but to embrace it completely, to stand in the tension between heaven and earth and say, yes, this too is me. And when you reach that place of inner reconciliation, you begin to see others differently as well. You stop seeking salvation in another person because you no longer feel incomplete. Love becomes an act of recognition rather than need, a meeting of two whole beings rather than two halves searching for completion. This is the fruit of integration, the capacity to love without projection, to desire without dependency, to express passion without losing yourself in it. Individuation does not remove desire, it refines it. It turns blind longing into creative participation in life. It transforms the instinct to possess into the capacity to connect. And through this process, you begin to experience something remarkable, that your sexuality, your creativity, your spirituality, they are all expressions of the same energy, flowing through you in different forms, calling you toward the same destination, wholeness. So when you next feel the pull of desire, resist the impulse to either condemn it or surrender blindly to it. Instead, become curious, listen, ask what it wants to teach you. For desire, when seen through the lens of awareness, is not a chain that binds you. It is a thread that leads you deeper into yourself. Follow it with honesty, with reverence, with courage, because in the end the task of life is not to conquer your desires, but to understand them. And in understanding them, you do not lose yourself, you finally become yourself.